Today, guys, we are reviewing the Exotic Sword Heartshadow. Now, aesthetically, this is a very interesting sword. Lore, stuff gets even juicier. However, we're going to talk functionality of the sword and, of course, where to get it. It is dropping from the Duality Dungeon, from the final encounter. There's also a number of triumphs that contribute to your drop rate being increased here for Heartshadow, such as collecting memories throughout the dungeon, completing it solo, as well as completing the master mode version of the dungeon. Now, let's talk about this exotic real quick. First up, it comes with the exotic perk, Exhumation. Heavy attacks made with full sword energy turns you invisible. Also fires exploding void projectiles. Now, it's pretty interesting. It actually fires 4 projectiles, and you actually see these 4 void balls on the sword itself. Really cool aesthetic play here. I will say, though, it kind of throws me off a little bit because the sword looks like it would have been a solar sword, considering it's like shaped like a flame. But I guess the void burns too, which actually takes us to the trait. Shot in the dark. Remaining invisible grants this weapon increased damage for a brief duration. Hitting a target with this weapon's projectiles while shot in the dark is active weakens them. Now, this is actually a very interesting exotic trait here. First up, shot in the dark is activated by simply going invisible. Now, you can either go invisible by utilizing a heavy attack, or if you're on the hunter class, you can simply dodge and go invis. Simultaneously, you can also use Echo of Obscurity, which also grants you invisibility. Now, once shot in the dark is active, this grants the sword 25% more damage. Meaning, before you even push a target, if you have a way of going invis and then getting the attack off, you'll get that 25% more damage right off the bat. Now, when you apply a heavy attack while shot in the dark is active, this will then weaken the target. Now, this is actually a 15% debuff, which actually stacks with the buff here with shot in the dark, bringing it to about 44% more damage after applying all this. And again, cycling between light attacks back into heavy attacks allows you to consistently keep proccing this over and over. Now, some things to keep in mind about Heartshadow: it does not seem to stack with Echo of Undermining, meaning the debuff is pretty much like any void ability debuff. Now, the shot in the dark debuff lasts around 6 to 7 seconds. And to hang on to shot in the dark even longer, you can rock fragments like Echo of Persistence, where void buffs apply to you such as Invisibility, Overshield, and Devour have increased durations. And even when you're coming out of invis, shot in the dark will actually stay with you at least for a little bit to hit that target for that full damage and get that debuff off. Now, the exotic catalyst, I didn't have it on this one. Big shout out though to Peter though for landing the RNG for this thing. The catalyst does increase movement speed while using this sword. This actually may be pretty beneficial, especially in like in-game PvE content where you do go invis and then you proceed to push to the next target, and so moving faster will allow you to get there quicker, thus allowing you to take advantage of shot in the dark. Now, some things here about shot in the dark that I tested just to make sure. It doesn't seem to proc things like controlled demolition or even Echo of Expulsion. Again, those things are tied to abilities. However, I wanted to check just to make sure, but no, it does not. Another thing about Heartshadow and shot in the dark, this increases your weapon damage outside of just the sword. This debuff that you apply is a 15% debuff for all your other weapons and for your teammates. So not only do you have a sword that's doing pretty potent damage, but it's also turning you invis, keeping you alive, and it's applying a debuff for your teammates to take advantage of. Now, I did want to test this with volatile rounds, or more notably, Echo of Instability, which grants you volatile rounds upon getting grenade kills. Now, considering that this is a void weapon, it of course does stack, which is pretty nice for those explosions, but again, just nice in general for that increase in damage. Now, before I get into a build suggestion for this, because I do have one, is this sword a game changer? I like it, but you are at risk when using any sword, right? Considering the stomp mechanics inside of Destiny, champions especially can stomp you or even boop you into oblivion. However, the ability to go invis and push up can allow you to get to the target safely to then proceed to put a debuff on it and do damage. And again, if you're rocking that Echo of Obscurity, when you go to finish that champion, you'll go invis yet again. And of course, you can stack things like Reactive Pulse, get an Overshield while you're doing this. There's a lot of ways that you can play into this. Now, I do have 2 complaints about Heartshadow. Number 1, its projectiles suck. Like, you'll be point blank at a target and you'll go to hit your heavy attack. You'll have your impact damage from the sword and then the 4 void projectiles. There were multiple times that one of those projectiles would literally just cut left or right or wherever and completely miss the ginormous target that I'm on top of. Now, I know you can back off and swing the heavy attack from a distance and the projectiles will make contact. But if you're too far back, you're going to miss the impact damage of the sword actually making contact with whatever it is you're trying to hit. So then you miss out on that damage. My other complaint is the amount of ammo that you use up. I think it's a little too costly. 4 ammo per heavy swing. Fellas, it's a fun sword, but I found myself multiple times with literally no ammo. Now, granted, if we had things like Lucent Finisher this season, it wouldn't matter. But we don't have that artifact mod anymore. And speaking of artifact mods, mods, we don't have any sword mods, which does play a role for me, especially when choosing what to bring in Grandmasters and other in-game content. Functionality-wise, it's a very neat sword, and I like it. Tracking could be better, though. The ammo conservation could also be better. It is interesting to me, though, that the dungeon weapon for this season is a weapon tied to, like, Void 3.0 instead of Solar 3.0. Now, before I let you go, I do want to bring up a Warlock build that was actually working pretty good for me. It was actually based on Nezarac's Sin. Again, Void ability kills, increase ability regeneration. I was also taking advantage of Harmonic Siphon to produce myself orbs, as well as taking charge. And when picking up these orbs, this was feeding into Loosened Blade. Again, this increases our sword damage for 5 seconds, consuming 1 stack of charge with light. It also greatly increases the charge rate of your equipped swords. Very, very nice for DPS. However, again, the issue that you're going to run into with the sword is just running out of ammo. I was also taking advantage of stacks on stack, although you could trade that out for even like protective light if you want. And I was combining this with elemental armaments, as well as Well of Tenacity, just to give myself added protection. Again, fellas, you're going to be very close to all these enemies using this sword, so survivability is pretty important. So guys, that is Heartshadow. Considering the dungeon, and I know a lot of people are actually using the sword yesterday in the dungeon, at least in the normal mode, you can definitely take advantage of this sword and content where enemies just want to instantly melee you to death. I would have been more curious to actually see this sword last season with artifact mods like Loosened Finisher, Volatile Flow, and I have no idea if we're going to see those mods again. But where Heartshadow sits now, it's a very neat sword that has great potential even for its damage, as long as those projectiles are hitting. I will say, try to direct your reticle onto your target as much as you can. I know you're like in third person and stuff, but try to keep it there just to kind of draw those projectiles. And I actually found like leaning to the right a little bit of the target would drag the projectiles a little closer to all make contact. And that damage against Carl was pretty nice. I mean, the heavy attack was hitting around 100 to 108,000 damage. And then with Shot in the Dark procs, we were kicking that up to like 135,000 damage. And if you start to include things like Volatile, we're talking like 150k plus on just the heavy attack. Impressive. Still not like as good as like Energy Accelerant and Crown Spitter was last year. To this day, that was the best sword damage in the history of sword damage. I know a lot of people are like, yo, what about Lament? What about OG Lament? Look, Lament's good. And by the way, Lament got fixed, so it's supposed to be performing a lot better now. But Energy Accelerant, Crown Splitter, fantastic. If we ever see Energy Accelerant back, because Bungie never actually fixed it. They let us play with that all season long. If we ever get it back, Heartshadow here will 100% benefit from that artifact mod. You can bet your booty it will instantly become one of the top DPS options in the game. Well, guys, let me know in the comments below what you think. We'll be grinding all day long over on Twitch, trying to get some god rolls for some of these dungeon weapons, so feel free to come by and check us out. And if you have any build suggestions for Heartshadow, feel free to drop them down below. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.